Today's tough question, Joe Milton at the Peyton Manning Passing Academy. So these invites go to the top quarterbacks in the NFL and college football. They also go to some former quarterbacks from the NFL. And Tennessee generally is able to work a guy in there. So while a guy may be of a similar ilk at Washington, he's probably not going to get the same invite that a guy, let's say, at Tennessee or Ole Miss, where Peyton and Eli were at. They're going to get invites, and the same will soon be said for Texas guys. So today's tough question focuses on Joe Milton, as we'll get your answers from the message board as well today. But what should his focus be, and what is a given? So bad journalism there, bad question asking, and that is double question. What's a given? What needs to be Joe Milton's focus moving forward? Caleb, what do you got?
I think the obvious one for everybody is Joe Milton's got to get better with his deep ball accuracy. I think that's the clear thing that doesn't matter what camp he goes to, he needs to work on. But I think one of the biggest things he needs to work on that he could work out with the Manning Passing Academy is his clock management, his awareness. We know what happened 2 years ago against Ole Miss. That's a forgotten, very big blunder that had nothing to do with his deep ball accuracy.
Well, can I stop you there for a second? Is that forgotten?
I would say you're right. It may not be forgotten, but we push it to a distant second behind the deep ball accuracy that we worry about with Joe Milton. And I think the Manning Passing Academy is one that could actually help him a little more, funny enough, with the clock management and his awareness. We're not so sure yet just how great his awareness may or may not be. We saw him methodically move the ball down the field against Clemson, but I mean, I think Clemson was playing a base defense the whole game, didn't really care to show anything, didn't really care to be in that bowl game. So that's still up for debate. And so I think for Joe Milton, understanding defensive scheme, I think something like the Manning Passing Academy is more about understanding defensive schemes, understanding clock management, things like that. His deep ball accuracy, he's going to work on that. That's not going to be something that he's going to learn at the Manning Passing Academy. That's something he's actually probably going to learn from Josh Heupel more than he will there.
Right, and Josh Heupel specifically teaches, I would say footwork as a whole. I would say being lighter on his feet, but that's not going to happen at a passing academy, and it's not going to happen with Josh Heupel because he is not upset whatsoever as far as not having the best footwork or having limited footwork. He doesn't want them to be like David Cutcliffe where they're going for reads. That's why a lot of the times that the reads are one side and people saying he's going to throw to his left or his right. So I would say footwork, but that's not going to happen in the passing academy. It's not going to happen under Josh Heupel. So I'm throwing that out the window. Now, the other thing that I would offer up to you as far as what Joe Milton needs to work on would be, yes, the deep ball passing ability, but I'm not concerned about that. And let me tell you why, because I thought the same thing about Hendon Hooker this time last year. And Hendon Hooker ended up being a very accurate quarterback downfield. So while that is a concern and should be a concern for Tennessee fans, should be a concern if he gets on point for the rest of the SEC and the SEC East, it is not number one to me. Number one is still the clock management. Now, I want to be real clear about that. You don't just jump out of bounds with the clock expired at the end of the game and be considered a guy that's going to be able to manage difficult situations perfectly from this point forward. I mean, Caleb, that is always a red mark and a black flag, whatever it is, red flag, black mark, whatever. And as you move forward, I would still have those questions based off that one play when he's headed to the NFL, Caleb. I mean, to me, that doesn't go away. Now, what is a given? This might surprise you, his leadership. From those that I talked to, his leadership is absolutely through the roof. Hendon Hooker is a once-in-a-generational type of leader like an Al Wilson in a totally different way. But I don't expect Joe Milton to be that. But if Hooker's a 10 on the leadership scale, I do believe that Milton will be fine, 7.5 or 8. And I've seen quarterbacks be as low as a 6 or so. So I don't have any concern about his leadership. Just want to see in the clutch clock management. And I think his accuracy on the deep ball will be better. So maybe I go a little off script, but I think Tennessee fans want to know that he can manage a tight game against Florida late and not make a boneheaded mistake. That's fair.
Yeah, that's a huge deal. And the leadership thing, we can't undersell in the sense of, Dave, you and I have watched quarterbacks, not just at Tennessee, but all over the country over the years. There were quarterbacks that were significantly worse than maybe their predecessor, but the teams played significantly better around them. I'm not talking T. Barton, Peyton Manning. It wasn't that. But I'm saying there are quarterbacks where you're like, well, why did the team play so much better with this quarterback than the previous quarterback? And it had everything to do with his leadership ability. So even if Joe Milton may have his issues at quarterback, you will still see, I think, the team play very hard in certain ways. I mean, I know you're a fan, but that was a lot of criticism of Casey Clausen. It didn't seem like he rallied the troops all the time. Even if he was a clutch quarterback, they didn't always seem ready to rally to play hard for him all the time in certain moments. And
right, okay, so I see where you're going. I think that's oversimplifying it just a little bit, that he didn't rally the troops. I think people did rally behind Casey the way they would rally behind a Joe Montana. I don't think Joe Montana was like a Terry Bradshaw or a Dan Marino that got in your face, but I think they rallied behind him. But I see your point on the scale of those two. I would be much more concerned about the clock management. I think that's the one. And it sounds like, Caleb, we're talking about the either leadership or clock management has just said, oh, it's the off season, it's all going to be fine, right? Well, that's not necessarily the case. But I do think the leadership will be fine, not just because of what I saw at Clemson. As a matter of fact, that would be last on the list. But those that I talked to within Tennessee's football program think the leadership is just fine from Joe Milton. So I'll take their word on it for sure.
Yeah, and that's a big sign that you believe that he could probably fix the mental aspect of the game too, such as clock management. The players that I think of that I think of that had.
I don't see. That's the part I still have some concern about. That to me has gotten kind of washed over.
Well, okay, but going back through history, the players that I remember distinct moments in history where quarterbacks made bonehead decisions with clock management. And everyone I remembered, that quarterback had some of the lowest intangibles I could think of. The most notable one was Jamarcus Russell scrambling at halftime against Tennessee when the 2005 LSU game, when they could have kicked a field goal and he scrambled trying to go for a touchdown. Well, Jamarcus Russell had the worst intangibles in the history of intangibles in the history of quarterback play. Another one was Vince Young did it a couple of times with the Titans. Jake Locker did it. Everybody I'm naming had intangible issues. So I can't think of a guy.
You know, the funny part too was at the Rose Bowl where Vince Young Johnson runs for the touchdown that ends up winning the game. Had he gotten knocked out of bounds or tackled in the field of play, that could have been viewed as a very different play. I think that Joe Milton's going to be fine as a leader. I'm just going to go ahead and tell everybody that right now. Is he good in clutch? Don't tell me you know that, because I don't know that and you don't know that. If I had to bet right now, if Caleb told me that accuracy at the end of the year will not be an issue, and I'm not going to put some sort of number on it like completion percentage because that's just stupid. But if Caleb told me that at the end of the day, like Hooker, we say deep ball throwing downfield was not an issue, that accuracy was not an issue, then I'd say I believe you. I think that's doable. I think the leadership is done. The question I still have is the in-game manageability and the end game and what he's doing in terms of leading the football team. Sorry, the one play at Ole Miss still stands out to me. I'm not hating on Joe Milton. I hope you know that, Caleb.
Oh yeah, that's a red flag to make that type of mistake. Now this is not going to make him look better, what I'm about to say, but my defense of him will actually make him look worse in terms of being a clutch quarterback. But you could say that he had way too many thoughts going through his head by being thrust into the position on the last drive after not starting all game, and maybe just kind of panicked a little bit and just didn't feel prepared for the moment to come back in the game. But yes, that's a huge red flag on its own if that was the case, because you don't want a quarterback who panics in the moment.
Right. I mean, we can say all these things to make it feel slightly better, but that is right up there with the most boneheaded play in clutch time that we've seen in recent Tennessee football history. That's not overstating it at all, is it? Right?
No, not at all. I mean, it's not the most bonehead clutch play by a Vol. Do you remember Cedric Wilson? Actually, it still might be, but do you remember Cedric Wilson in the NFL catching a pass for the 49ers, and all he has to do is go down, and they can get a game-winning field goal, but he fights for more yards, runs out the clock, and they go to overtime and lose.
No, I don't remember that one. I remember Deshaun Jackson. Seemed like he did it in high school, college, and pro over and over.
He did.
When he dropped the ball before he crossed the goal line. That's important. It's brought to you by it's brought to you by Andy Mason, AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Easy for me to say. Best service, best prices in the biz. Go to AndyMasonRealEstate.com to learn more. That is today's tough question. So at the end of the day, Milton at the Passing Academy, your biggest focus in the offseason by Joe Milton and what is a given is what, Caleb Calhoun? Because I'll tell you, my biggest focus, I believe that he should work on the transition between passing and running. Remember, Bryce Young wasn't great at that. I thought he held on to the ball too long early when he was a starter. So this is a natural progression. That transition, which I think cost him against Ole Miss, I think he was a little bit in flux as to whether he had crossed the line of scrimmage. And what is a given? I think his leadership and really close to that, his deep ball accuracy will be a given heading into the 2024 season. Today's tough question brought to you by AndyMasonRealEstate.com. So where do you stand on that? Focus and given.
I stand on him being able to read defenses in the intermediate passing game. I think he's good at it, but I don't put a lot of stock into the Clemson game and him being able to do that. I will say it's an interesting thing you brought up about his kind of pocket awareness. You're right. Bryce Young had it, and Hendon Hooker had it too last year. Last summer, that was a concern for both of them, and both were much better with their pocket presence last year. And I think if there's one thing Peyton Manning can teach, it's pocket presence, because nobody had better pocket presence than he did.
True, but the decision to take off and run, I don't know that that's something Peyton can teach, because he didn't take off and run hardly at all. He threw it away.
Yeah, but that's because he knew he couldn't take off and run. I bet if he could, he would know when to run better than anybody. If you put like Cam Newton's speed and Peyton Manning in 2010,
that's interesting. So Peyton Manning's decision to chuck behind the line of scrimmage just to get the ball out of bounds and incomplete pass is the same thing as Mike Vick saying, "I'm going to tuck it and run for 30." It's kind of what you're saying.
Yes, although don't forget
that split decision.
Don't forget, though, that Peyton Manning, when he does run, he is the greatest bootleg runner of all time. No one sells a play action better than Peyton Manning before a bootleg. I can name like 7 times. The Alabama one in '95 is the most famous, but he did it in the NFL once a year, it felt like, where he called the whole defense.
I think he did it first at Tennessee against Vanderbilt, but he did do it in the NFL. You know the key to that? Don't tell your teammates. And he wouldn't tell his teammates, and they would block the exact same way as if it was a running play.